start recording and give the floor to Alex. Alex, welcome. It's so awesome to have you here. I'm very excited to be doing an event together. I think the last time we did an event together, we were talking about people ops when we were still working together, which is super fun. So welcome back. Would you mind giving us a quick introduction about yourself and about your work at ChartHop?
Yeah, awesome to be here, Clara. Thanks for inviting me. So I think you've got a particularly interesting background where a lot of the foundation of this community was actually built by our very own Clara about 2.5 years ago when she worked for us at Gather. I can give a quick introduction on myself. So I'll be talking about the People Ops community, which is a community space that exists within an HR tech company called ChartHop. I'm Alex, and I have kind of a winding path to this community role. I co-founded a company called Gather back 3.5 years ago. Like I mentioned, Clara actually worked for us for a little bit and getting our community off the ground there. And Gather was acquired by ChartHop about a year ago. And when that acquisition happened, I was kind of our growth founder. And Clara had set up a bunch of interesting stuff on our community side. We had partnered there and we were doing some just really, I think, interesting things as a growth channel. And so when I joined the ChartHop team, I kind of got to craft a role for myself on the team there. And basically there were a lot of people interested in community. So I jumped over and kind of built a community role off of some of the different community pieces that we were working on at Gather. And so now I basically sit on the marketing team as a full-time community person, trying to extend our brand on the ChartHop team. And we do that, we're working in the, so this is people operations community, working with a lot of folks and tech who work in people operations related roles. And that's kind of who we serve with our product as well. So kind of our community has, I think, it's this vague concept that exists across multiple assets. So kind of the front end of our community is the People Ops weekly newsletter, which goes out over HubSpot's email integration. We also have what we actually call the People Ops community, which is a space hosted between Circle and Meetsy, which is, I think what you think of as a more traditional community where you've got threading, question and answer, and then we use Meetsy for community peer matching programs. And then we also have this asset called the People Ops job board, which was actually Clara's idea originally going back to 2.5 years ago. It's now grown into something really big, which is a huge driver of growth for our People Ops weekly newsletter. That's basically a job board that at any given point has 200 plus curated roles for people in our community that we then highlight in our People Ops weekly newsletter. So I'll touch on each of these with a little bit more depth. But yeah, feel free to just drop in questions. I've got the chat pulled up, so I will see if I can if I remember answers some of those as we go.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to follow the chat as well. If we have any questions, we can also get back to them at the end of the session too.
Cool. Sounds good. So, I think one of the key things with our community, I think a big thing for me is obsessing over this ratio of the time you spend in our community versus the insights you extract. So in our space, there's a whole lot of communities, content, people are overwhelmed with stuff. And often it's really hard to navigate to actually get to what you need. And so I think about, your traditional hour-long webinar where somebody dedicates an hour of their time and they might pull 1 or 2 things out of it. I see that as a bad ratio. And so our goal with everything we provide is to have you come join, engage in the community for 10 minutes and pull a lot of relevant things out of it for you. Or if you're having a one-on-one, it's a relevant person you're meeting with. Or if you're in a large event, you're pulling 15 or 20 things out of that 1-hour session. So that's kind of the thing above that drives what we do across these assets that we kind of strive for. There's a lot of different ways that communities can sit within the organization. For us, the People Ops community is mainly I'm on the marketing team. It's mainly a marketing tool to extend our brand and basically reach people who might not be reached by ChartHop otherwise. They might not know about ChartHop, but we're putting an ad on the bottom of every single People Ops weekly newsletter. And so we're kind of like over time engaging them with the ChartHop brand so that when it comes time to like make a decision on, a product, ChartHop is like their first, go-to answer because they've learned about us over time. But we don't focus our community on ChartHop. So it's really more generic People Ops content. But you can see here, like this is kind of the presentation I put together for the team of the different ways we provide value at the community. So one is like top of funnel growth, engaging with the sales funnel. Then on the right here, you see there's some other kind of functions of just like helping the team, understand our people a little bit more. Like here's conversations that are happening. Here's what's top of mind for like target persona. So there's some value there as well. And then kind of like how it exists, this is initially how I pitched it. A few things have changed, but it's generally the kind of the same concept is like, we capture people that aren't captured otherwise, or bring people in from the like sales funnel who are like dying leads, funnel them all into the newsletters, kind of like our front of the community there. Then eventually we kind of consider our community platform, our community space, our like M2 members, which is like a little bit more engaged back and forth. Have them apply to that space. We do only let in certain people with certain types of roles. And then in theory, we haven't launched it yet. Still, we will build out a more defined facilitator, like ambassador space. So that's kind of the structure there. So I'll dive quickly into like each of the specific assets that we have. So first is the People Ops Weekly. So we've been doing this. This is our kind of oldest asset in the community, and we've been doing this since like early Gather days, so 2.5 years maybe. It's really started to take off in the past year or so. We've got almost 7,000 active subscribers, which is up from like beginning of last year was like 2,000. So I think we grew 3x last year. And what this is a Friday email. It's got a short blurb, something tactical, 3 articles from around the space, and then we highlight new jobs that are on the job board. And I think we've seen this as a really big success. It's like our most viral asset in the community, and the thing that like is kind of just a plug and play thing at this point. And I think there's several reasons, kind of like talking to community members and people who read it on a regular basis, why it's been successful, and like really it just like stands out versus a lot of other emails they're getting from HR tech vendors or, other newsletters that are like very long form. A lot of these people don't have a ton of time during their week to read really long form stuff. Like they're busy fighting a lot of fires. So the commitment to kind of keeping everything under a 5-minute read, to not linking out to just like random blog posts that we want to distribute and get like views on, but like actually putting content in the body that's like short and like very succinct and concise. People appreciate that. And then also kind of key to this is the jobs we post at the end. So you'll see as we talk about the job board, the role that plays as well. So jumping in here, the People Ops community kind of spaces. So this exists between, we did a big, we'd been using Meetsy for like 2 years. Clara, I think you picked that out initially, and it's just very early stages. That's been an awesome tool for us. I think actually, I will note it's been, Meetsy is now owned by CommSort, and it's been a little bit buggier over the past year or so than it had been previously. I still think it's like one of the best tools for the community matching, and so that's why we've kept it there. We also use Circle, which we brought on last summer as part of our kind of like big community relaunch under Gather, or under ChartHop, where we decided to just kind of like repackage the community under the People Ops community title. In that search process, we came up with Circle as kind of our go-to. It's been somewhat successful. So some things have worked really well. Others haven't. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more depth in a second. But what has been successful, so matching programs on Meetsy, our large events have been really successful, and we're going to be doing some more of those. Those are actually not hosted in Circle. Those are just like right now we're using Zoom for that, but we like promote them within the community and externally. The one in December that we had over 1,000 registrants, which I think was really exciting for the community and for ChartHop. So we're going to be investing more in that. And I think another thing that's been successful, a lot of the other kind of HR people ops community spaces are Slack groups that just kind of allow anybody in with like talent acquisition or HR roles. And so I think you get this problem of they're just like overwhelming and have a lot of mess, because you'll have somebody from like a 50-person startup asking a question, and then like somebody from a 5,000 person company answering that question without the right context. And so just allowing that many different people in, I think creates a challenge. And so I think by vetting members, by focusing on this particular persona, we've been successful in like generating like really good engagement there. What's failed is that we tried to do some smaller cohort spaces. So think about, and like, so right now the community is like anybody who's in a people ops role at any level, but not focused on talent acquisition. For a tech company under 1,000 people, they can be in the community, right? But previously we had divided up into smaller cohort spaces. The idea being like, let's just do question and answer threading for like, people who are in mid-level manager roles at a 50 to 500 person startup. And then we'll create all these different spaces for like different levels of people. And I think people were very excited about that concept. And I was excited about it as well. And I think it works on paper. In practice, though, it's so hard. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, like anybody who's run a community, like getting engagement off the ground is really hard in a single space. So when you've divided up your engaged people across like, I think we had like 8 different cohorts, then you have like repeated content, but like only a few engaged people in each group. So it's like, you've just made the challenge like 8 times harder. And the reality is we had like a couple cohorts really take off and get engagement. Like we had enough like evangelists who were like willing to go in there and post a lot of stuff, but some other ones just never got off the ground and were pretty dead from the beginning. And so ultimately, actually just a few weeks ago, we decided to drop the cohort model and just focus on the bigger space. And what you're seeing here is like a bigger space kind of question and answer threading. And then something we've always struggled with was small group events. And this goes back, we've been trying this for forever. And I think, when we relaunched, we tried a lot of small group discussions, and we were struggling, I think, with getting a consistent product out there. So we were doing about 1 or 2 a week, and we did this for 3 to 4 months, and several discussions were just like absolutely great. When we got 5 or 6 people in there, we had some awesome discussions, and it was like very well worth their time. But other times, like we couldn't ever predict how many people were going to show up, even if we got them to RSVP, because it's like the first thing that would go for them if their day started getting busy. And so like sometimes we had 1 or 2 people show up, and that was always a really bad experience. Or like, if we said, okay, let's expect like half the people to show up and got 12 signed up, and then all of a sudden 10 came, then that's too many people to have a really good small group discussion. And so, we looked back and we were like, we've hosted 20 of these, and maybe 4-ish have been like a really good product. And then, the other 16, like it just wasn't there. And so I think we had to really look back at that critically and say, like, this isn't working for us right now, and maybe we try it again later. But like, I think I also had to look back at the value to ChartHop, and I was putting a whole lot of time into, moderating these events, coming up with them, getting signups, those sorts of things. And the value wasn't there for ChartHop compared to like, I could do, I think we did 20 of these events and maybe got a total of 120 attendees across like 3 or 4 months. Or I could spend that time doing a large event and like make it really splashy external for ChartHop. Like it's a really great brand play, and a lot of people get to see it. It's something we can highlight on our social media and bring in prospects and like get 1,000 registrants for about the same amount of time. And that just was a lot better of an ROI for the ChartHop brand. So that's like one of those balances where I had to think about what ChartHop needed as well. But it wasn't a great product for the community too. Then other challenges I've had, just in general, I think, I'm a single community person. So I don't have a lot of time for community management, especially when really I'd say like the best aspect of our community continues to be the newsletter, which I'm writing every week. And that gets a lot of the time. So I think, I've struggled with just like having the space to like jump in and proactively like create conversations when, things get a little bit quiet. And then the other thing is I have been fairly unimpressed with the Circle and like honestly a lot of their competitions tooling around like notifications and pushes to email. And so this is like my little short break spiel about what I think a lot of community platforms are getting wrong, which is a lot of them want to create spaces that you drive people to. And the reality is like, depending on who your community is, if you're working like in my space, it's a B2B product and we're working with, people who are on the job during the day. They don't have time to go in and proactively like see what's going on in the community. And I think as I assessed tools, there were not a lot of tools that were building around like the actual flow of work. And like, I want to have a very specific design of like, here is, the times that we send out emails and here's like digest for the community and we can like structure that in different ways. And I've been pretty unimpressed with Circle's like weekly digest email, which is what I really rely on for people to like jump into the community and engage with, because I don't have a lot of customization with it. So if anybody does have any ideas, I mean, we're sticking with Circle, but like would love to hear if anybody's had any successes there. I think it's always an interesting balance because we can turn on notifications within a certain space, but then like as our question and answer threads start to get more popular, then people get overwhelmed with email notifications and turn it off. And then we're back to relying on a weekly digest that I can't like quite curate enough. So my challenge to anybody building in this space is just considering more the flow of work. I think so many of the platforms try to just drive people into their platforms to actually take action. And then lastly, we have the People Ops job board. This is really like one of our big secret drivers of growth for People Ops Weekly. A lot of people come for the jobs and then stay for the content. We've really ramped this up the past few months as we've seen a lot of layoffs in the People Ops space. And so now we're spending about 3 to 4 hours a week curating jobs, getting them onto the job board, and then basically like highlighting, like I use my own LinkedIn to like highlight the job board over and over and over. A bunch of people use this. So you see like this call to action on the job board, which is like, get these delivered in your email inbox via the People Ops Weekly newsletter. People sign up for that. And then obviously read the content because the jobs are at the bottom and then become, then they join the full community. And so it's a great kind of top of funnel driver of growth for us. So that's about all I've got. I wanted to keep this pretty short on the presentation standpoint. So Clara, I will turn it back to you and see what questions we have.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, so much. Thank you for the run through, and it's amazing to see how much the community has been growing. What have you been building? That's super exciting. I think one of the first things I quickly wanted to ask you before we dive into some of the questions that we got during registration, and anyone on this session live, feel free to drop your questions in the chat as well. I think my question right now is kind of what's next for you in your mind as you've been kind of curating and building this community more and more. What are you thinking? Are you planning to add any more programming right now, right? Because it seems like you have like the way you described your funnel, it seems like, everything's working really well. Are you planning any additions, or are you kind of sticking to this?
Yeah, constantly iterating. And I think especially in the like community platform space. So we've done, like I said, we got rid of the cohorts and we're kind of mid-process on a shift of dropping that. And like, basically what we're going to end up doing is like bigger cohorts. So we'll keep, right now we've only let in people that are in that like target group I was talking about of like under 1,000 people at a like tech company who would have like specific employee experience, people operations roles. But we have a whole ton of people on the wait list who like don't fit into that. And I think a challenge for us as a company is that we're trying to move a little bit more upmarket this year. And, and I think this is, if anybody's in kind of the tech space, like, and a B2B software, is that a lot of people targeted tech companies for a long time that were growing really fast and like easy targets. And so that's what we built our community around. And now we're targeting a lot of larger companies, which is not who we built our community around. So I've got a big effort to like basically move from like these, like all these small sub cohorts of like tech people to like one big tech group and then one big other group for more traditional businesses that are like larger that we're also targeting and that we've had people apply to the community from. So like that's a big effort for me. And that's just like aligning with, ChartHop's goals. Also, we just had, we did our first big like large event in December, and that was huge success for us with the like 1,000 registrants. And I think we had like 400 some people live, which was awesome. And just like a whole lot of buzz around that. And so we're going to be building on that model. I think it had a very unique kind of style to it. It was like we had 14 people come on to give like 2-minute talks on like different topics and people operations, like what they thought was coming next for this year. Just got so much great feedback. And so we're trying to figure out how to build that into like probably a quarterly basis. So we're going to have another one the first week of April that I'm working on, but like actually figuring out like, okay, how do we scale this? Like build consistent topics, like manage speakers, do those sorts of things. And so that's one of my big efforts is like ramping up that and like turning it from like, we had this one really great large event to like, okay, what are things that we build on from there? What do we do differently? What do we like lock in as like, this is how we do large events. So that's a big effort for me this year. Yeah,
absolutely. That sounds super exciting. And before we move to the next questions, we also had one quick question from Benia. If you could quickly repeat your challenge with Circle. I think you mentioned a couple of things on their notifications and newsletter. So if you could kind of just repeat that one very quickly for us.
Yeah, totally. So basically with Circle, I mean, and it's customized, like it's very customizable space, but you can set default notifications for certain spaces. I've always been wary of like making the default for spaces that it like sends an email to somebody every time that something gets posted there, because like they're just going to very quickly turn that off. When I picked out Circle, I was banking on like one of the things that stuck out to me was like they had this weekly digest email that you could customize like the top of it. In my mind, you could customize a lot more of it, and I found out kind of using it over time that wasn't the case. And so you have this digest email. It goes out like only on Thursdays, like Thursday afternoons. You can't change that at all. And you can put a blurb at the top of it and decide like, oh, I want to highlight like the top posts in the past week or like the top comments, but like they're toggle buttons. Like you really don't have a lot of customization in what that looks like. And then you also have, and this was a problem we had at the beginning with our cohorts, is that it doesn't send if there's not enough activity, but it doesn't tell you what that activity line is. And it doesn't tell you that it didn't send to people. So like sometimes like some of our community members would get that digest email and others wouldn't, based on if their cohorts were active or not. And so it's just like, as a community manager who really relied on, like, in my mind, like we were going to rely on that digest email to be the thing that, creates interest, and like it comes to their inbox and they can see, what's interesting for them that they want to engage with. That we have not been able to customize that or get the insight into it that we need. I think ideally I'd also be able to like design it in a way that it's not a weekly digest, right? I could do like twice a week with like different types of content each week. Cause like, I think I would love for the community to pop into people's inbox 2 to 3 times a week. So it stays relevant, top of mind. They can engage with questions fast enough. But I've just been pretty unimpressed. Like, and this is something I like really did try to scope for in the search process, looking at a lot of other tools, and like, there's not a lot of optionality in terms of like, how do you bring content from your community platform into somebody's email and their flow of work?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one, especially if you, like you said, you want to curate the content, right? But I mean, you could do it manually, right? But then you would spend like all your time just basically like putting posts together, which would be really, really time consuming. So I get that.
That is something I think like that is a solution, is to manually do this. I think already writing an email, like a weekly email for like the broader community, it's hard to like build that time in. I think I've seen some like community teams that have like 2 or 3 people on them that like are able to do that pretty well. And like, but I can't add another just like manually created email to my list each week. Yeah,
absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, thank you for going a little deeper on notifications and emails with us. I think once talking about like all the communications that's going towards your community, especially in the beginning, like you want to curate it, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. We have another question from Sarah from our registrations. And the question is, how do you find the time to write content regularly? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think it's basically, I like come into each week with, hopefully an idea in mind for the People Ops Weekly newsletter. I try to get that done as early as I can. And so it goes out Fridays. We have an editorial process now that's different from when I was at Gather as a co-founder. I was sometimes writing in on like a Thursday and nobody's looking over it. We've got an editorial process that's got to run through. I usually just block out times in my mornings. So I'll work like 7 to 9. Throughout I've gotten in I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and like curating the content that comes into me via like I use that as almost like a separate community platform where I engage with a lot of people in our community, just like where a lot of HR people folks live. And so like throughout the weeks, I'll be like pulling like, oh, here's articles that were shared, and here's like some interesting LinkedIn threads that maybe I can turn into a blurb. So like I'll add those to my like Todoist app throughout the week. And then so Monday morning I'm going in and like hopefully I've gotten like 20 articles I've found from the past week that I can then like skim 20 of them and like find 3 of them that are like interesting enough to share. And then I write the blurb on Monday mornings and get those articles, find something tactical. And then hopefully it's done by like the draft is done by Tuesday afternoon. Obviously I'm doing a lot of other things during that time period, but I try to get it done as early as possible in the week, and I have to use my mornings for it to write the like really heady stuff. So
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of focus time necessary, I can imagine. So we have a question from Philip. I have a Slack community and I want to start doing regular activities, but not sure how. So I think like one of the general question is like, where to start. You can do events, you can do groups, you can do newsletters. Like for someone that just has a little group, where would you recommend starting when they're kind of just getting it off the ground?
Yeah. I think it depends on a little bit of like what you're trying to do with the community. We had success, like, we started with newsletter first and then we did matching, and like that's all we did for like most of our time, and like we considered it a community. I think, I'm still very optimistic. There's a lot of newsletters out there, but like if you have a style that can cut through the noise, I think that can be a very effective way to get things started. People love really curated stuff and really short stuff, and that will stand out. Matching was great. I think, for us with Meetsy is because we could turn it on and it wasn't a lot of like maintenance. Like we didn't have to do a lot of stuff. It was like very automated that we were providing value to our community really fast. We were very late to the game with the kind of question and answer threads. And I was wary of getting into that just because like there's so many other spaces out there that are generally doing that same thing. And like, until like, hey, like we've got a lot of the very right people in this group who are relevant for each other, it can either like die really fast or like get into that situation where you're just like have the wrong people answering questions for the wrong things. So that's something like I'm glad we waited a long time to do. And of course, we're still learning through that. So I guess the way I thought about it was like, I looked at all the communities that were out there that our people are in, and I said, what things, and there was another Slack group that was like really good at question and answers. And like, that's where people went to for that. So I was like, what are the things we can build around that they don't have in the other really good community spaces that are out there? And so like, that's how we assessed it. So I think it just depends. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you like hit like 2 great questions. Number one, like, how can you differentiate what are folks not getting on the market right now? And 2, what are you building the community for, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. I know we're on time. I have 2 very, very, very quick questions. One of them can be like an A or B answer. And this question is from Laura. How do you feel about content? Would you go for quality or for quantity?
I think definitely quality. I think that's been one of our key kind of differentiators.
Cool. I thought you were going to say quality, so I'm happy that I got that right. And last question from Katie. I saw that you have 6,000 subscribers and only like roughly 400 members in the community. Why did you not invite everyone from the newsletter to the community? I think you answered this kind of a little bit in your presentation, but I thought it was still like a really interesting point, because I think, the first thought of things, we can have a giant, multi-thousand community group. Why not do it right away?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. So we've had like almost 900 people apply to the community, a lot sitting on the wait list. It's all been just getting the right people in there, because I think our newsletter has like managers who care about people operations related things, like people in HR tech, like companies who care about keeping up with stuff. So like we have too broad of an audience there. And I wanted to make sure that the community space was just like one specific, like very important audience for us, where everybody else they meet in there has something relevant for them and is not going to try to sell them something, or not going to be like, very irrelevant or like a very different type of role.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, we're on time, actually 3 minutes over time, but I'm really happy that we got a chance to go over these final questions as well. Alex, thank you so much for hopping on this conversation today. Thank you all for tuning in live. If you're listening to the recording, let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We are running our community tours every single month. We have a couple more coming that are super exciting from our friends in our little community space. So yeah, I think that's it from us today. Alex, again, thank you so much for your time and for joining us, and hope to see you all in our next one.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Take care.